Yeah, you're using like all your ethers and your potions and stuff, and you're supposed to lose it anyway. What? Yeah,
Nonsense,
yeah.
nonsense. You do not use a single ether or elixir until you have over 100 of them. You're at the very end of the game, and you're like, well, there might be a bonus boss after this, so I still am not going to use it. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And today I'm joined by Dan Letzring of Letiman Games, and then also Nicholas Yu, the designer of the upcoming Letiman Joint Adventure Tactics. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for having us.
I feel like I really built that intro up there. And you were coming in a little soft on that. You're like, man, this dude from Alaska, he's pretty intense.
That's great.
Yeah, you're really excited. Let's get this going.
I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about this.
Well, it's later for you there, and also you're in the midst of a move, Dan, and then you guys have exhaustively been working on this Kickstarter. So I can understand, but clearly I'm so excited about this. Let's get this out of the way up front. Mm-hmm. This game looks like it is finally the tabletop gaming adaptation or inspired adaptation of Final Fantasy Tactics that I've been looking for. True or false?
That's absolutely what we're hoping.
Yeah, that's true. So
strongly inspired by
it started with our conversation about Final Fantasy Tactics. So you're right that it was not just like we wanted to be partially inspired by Tactics. Nick and I approached him, was like, that was my favorite game of all time, and
yes,
he said, me too.
Mine too. Yeah,
his eyes flew. I mean, we'd known each other for a long time, and for some reason this just conversation came up a couple of years ago, and we were like, yes, and we started working on it right away. And it was just because we both had a love for this game.
Yeah.
And
so we've been working on it for 2 years now. Dan and I do the local maker fair every year, and we've been doing that for 5. Next year will be our 6th year. A couple years ago, Dan, that conversation took place. Dan's like, I love Final Fantasy Tactics, and I said, me too. And then I came back later that weekend, like that was Saturday. Sunday night, I had like 20-page design document for all the classes online. I was ready to go. Like, as soon as Dan said it, I'm like, yeah, let's do this.
But you're right in that, like, so a lot of games try and have this tactics feel, but they don't do. There's not that job class system. So that's what we wanted was we wanted a game that felt like, okay, the fighting. There's a lot of encounter skirmish type games where you go fight to fight, which felt like in that game. But we wanted that free form, like, you can just advance. You get so we don't have job points, but that feeling of okay, how do I spend my leveling up? What do I do? And this game has so many options. It's freeform leveling up. If you're a wizard and you want some heals or just to round your character out, or you didn't have enough, you go cleric level 1, you get a couple heals, but then you go back to wizard and level up through that, and then to combine, you make a warlock, you level up through warlock or shaman, and then you could go back to wizard 3 after level 3, or it's really however you want to do it. And that's what we wanted, was that freeform. Pick your passives, pick your abilities, slot your actions in, and then build your deck and go from there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I need this game on my table right now. But what I really want to know is if I can surround the equivalent of a wild chocobo and just continue hitting it and then have it heal my party and then abuse the experience point system.
There's no grinding.
Oh, man, come on. That to me is core principles.
There are callbacks, though.
Oh, okay.
Like, you're not going to have everybody be a squire and have focus, so you can just stand still and focus to get job points, right? Yeah. But there is an ability called Rock Toss, which is a throwback to the squire starting stone throw.
That's great.
I mean, they're absolutely references, callbacks to the game that we loved. But I mean, some things obviously had to change from digital to tabletop.
We don't have any like animals you're riding, and there's no chocobos or anything like that. Obviously, we couldn't get too close to the IP, so there's nothing like that in there. But I think there is a chocobo game coming out this year, right? I think I saw.
Yeah, Square's actually getting into the tabletop space.
Which is scary. Like, I mean, well, we'll be out there first, but maybe they'll want to talk about an actual tactics licensed game.
Go check out the cover art to the upcoming expansion to Bunny Kingdom and tell me they don't have a chocobo on the cover of that thing. I swear to God. Now, I occasionally get accused of going deep into real niche interests without giving some baseline explanation here. So maybe for the layman who hasn't played Final Fantasy Tactics or hasn't even seen this game, let's go over like a nutshell on what Adventure Tactics is, what people could expect if they're just a tabletop gaming enthusiast and they're like, what is this new thing?
Well, as Dan was saying, they're very similar games out there, like Descent, Gloomhaven. They have, your grid-based dungeon battler, right? Tactical minis combat. But again, what's really we want to set this game apart is the class system, where it's free form. You start with a base class, and then you expand. And we have over 20 classes that you can mix and match, and you can go back and forth. You're not stuck. Like in Descent, you're always that same character. In Gloomhaven, you can unlock new classes, but then that's your character. And a lot of times, you don't even know what that character is once you've unlocked it until you start playing it. You're kind of stuck with it.
Right.
So these are. I was gonna say these are great games that we love, but they don't have that class system, which to me just screams Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah, and I was going to say the other thing that he didn't mention too is we have over 20 classes, and each class has 5 levels within it. So each class has every level up gives you better cards or different cards within that class that might maybe synergize within that class and make you better at what you do for within that class. So there's level 5 wizard up to level 5 shaman, level 5 paladin, and like Nick said, you could go level 1, 2 of one, and then switch to something else, and then go back, and really just build your deck how you kind of want to direct your character.
Is this fully cooperative, or is there a competitive element to this?
Yeah, it's full co-op. There's a boss deck that tells you what the monsters do when it comes up. So you don't have to have a DM player like Descent. You don't have to be dedicated. And Dan has talked about the action system. So your actions are based on cards. So there's some actual deck building too. It's class building. So you get some fighter cards by being a fighter. The more fighter levels of fighter you level up in, the more fighter type cards you get. And then wizard will give you fireballs, some AOE. Cleric will give you heals, and then as you move into the advanced classes, you specialize into those types of things too. But there's also passive and dice abilities. Like if you remember, you had those slots that you had in Final Fantasy Tactics, which once you unlock it, right, and so you mix and match. And so we have that in there too. Like the wizard can slide diagonally 1 square. Scout. The archer has Scout, which is Dan's wife's favorite ability. It allows you to move up and down in the initiative order. So we do initiative like those classic JRPGs too, where each character is represented by an icon, and you just splay them out and shuffle them. So each round you have a random initiative.
It's going to be an entire campaign, right? You're playing several games in succession. Is there a story to this, or is it just going to be a series of rooms that you're encountering?
So there's a long story. It's choose your own adventure, so you're not even going to see everything within it.
Oh, that's great.
The overarching story goes, but even the beginning of the campaign, it starts, this isn't a spoiler, but the story starts where you're at a village. Each character has their backstory with what they're doing. There's an assault on the gate and an assault at the back of the village. And the first fight, you pick which one you want to go to. So even right at the beginning, you pick your starting fight, really without knowing much about what either one is. And they're completely different fights. They give you different loot. They give you different items if you defeat the fight in certain ways. One could direct you to the other fight. Depending on how well you do in some fights, they might direct you to other fights or random encounters later. There's like a random encounter deck that you pull cards out of, and you don't really set up a fight. But if you lose to a boss, maybe their henchman might come up in the random encounter deck because you didn't kill them all in an earlier fight. So the story kind of has little bits that carry through. And there's a main overarching story that drives you through it as well.
What about characters? Like, am I just going to have a default character who has no inherent abilities themselves, or do you pick a character, they may have some sort of specialty, and then you're going to evolve them through the job class system?
You pick a specific character and you evolve them through the job system. We originally had, you could be anything, anytime, and all 5 people could be the exact same. But we actually felt that restricting that created more freedom. We didn't want all the characters to feel the same, right? Exactly the same. And so you have your 5 basic archetypes: fighter, cleric, archer, rogue, wizard, and each person is one of those, and they're named and they have unique art.
Yeah. So
you go from there.
It starts, and so if you choose something like the archer to start, and so that's Olette. She's the archer, and that's your player board and your mini. And it's going to start as Olette. And as you level up and you change classes, kind of the picture of your class may not look like Olette anymore, but you're still using that player board and that mini. You're still Olette. Right. You just gained some abilities through other jobs as well, but that's your character. She has a backstory that starts where she is in the beginning of the campaign when you meet up with this group. And so you're her. And although you may go away from being an archer, that's who your main character is through the game.
What I know about adapting any sort of system, whether it's another tabletop gaming system, a video game system, where you're trying to capture the essence of something, there are so many ideas and it has to evolve so much. I want to know, like, what was some of the most challenging aspects of designing this game to make it actually feel right? And were there some things that you just couldn't get that are left on the cutting room floor?
We had to make some sacrifices for that. I think the class system that stayed pretty intact from front to finish, but in a solo video game, digital game, it's fine if your character misses, right? You have a bunch of other characters, that's fine. In the multiplayer game, that really sucks. Like it comes up in your turn, you're like, well, I guess I didn't do anything. Sorry, guys. Right?
So there are no misses in this.
Yeah. So there's no accuracy system. Instead, there's different custom dice, and they have different values. So like the white die is a D3. It's 1 to 3. So the cleric gets that for their heals and their damage spells. The fighter has them, and the wizard have the most reliable die. It's 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 2 2s, 2 5s. The archer has a swingy die, the black die. It's got 2 1s and 2 6s. There's no 3 or 4, so it's 1 1 2 5 6 6. And there's a blue die, which is just generally better. It's 3 through 5. So, there's still some better, there's some mitigation in terms of rolling the different dice, but you're never going to do nothing on your turn unless you literally just choose to do nothing on your turn.
Yeah. And one thing that got cut that I think, there's a lot of things we captured from Final Fantasy Tactics, and the job class system is very true to that, and it stayed true throughout. And that's something we really wanted to focus on. So one thing we had to kind of cut was, in Tactics, there's the terrain, right? And
the elevated terrain, yeah.
Right? So that we don't have right now, but it's something that we may want to visit in the future. But I just, at some point you kind of had to say, what's the focus of what we're building right now with this main campaign? And that wasn't a part of it.
Yeah, there's one fight that touches on it, the
skeletal
towers. Yeah. So we have it, but it's not represented in blocks. Yeah. So it was basically just treated as extra movement. But I mean, let's say the campaign does amazingly well, and we can do an expansion. Yeah, I would love to have like a mountain map that goes out, and everything awesome that you remember from Tactics.
So we have a lot more plans, but we had to pick really, like I said, a focus to make this first game. It's a big project in and of itself as it is, and so we had to pick exactly kind of how we wanted it to go and make it streamlined. And I'd say one more thing was just making sure. I mean, as you're leveling up, the bosses are appropriate levels for how you're leveling up, right?
There's no grinding.
Right, there's so many different ways you can go with your leveling up, staying within your character, switching around, coming back, and making sure that the bosses are kind of appropriate so that it's not too hard, not too easy every fight, right? And so that they're all appropriate levels. So that's been kind of a challenge, but...
We also tweaked movement and range. We did a compromise solution. So diagonal movement is pretty broken in grid-based games. So we one character's special ability allows him to move diagonally once, but that's a cost that you have to slot that ability. So we left movement as orthogonal, but range we did like you remember, like D&D. So diagonal counts for range too. So it's a little different because movement is orthogonal cardinal directions, and then range is just how you generally do range in tile games.
Is there a better word to represent nerdy tabletop gaming hobbies than orthogonal? Like, I drop orthogonal every chance that I can, and the only person that's going to actually know that word is someone who's actually playing tabletop games with me. Like, if I'm at the office and I'm like, if we move orthogonally in this, like, what the hell are you talking about? Something that I've noticed in a lot of adventure games and dungeon crawl games where you have these DM-less experiences, you're playing fully cooperative, is that there's a trend towards fail-forward games. Games where if you are playing a mission and you fail the mission, you don't just replay it, you just may have some sort of story consequence, you may have some actual mechanical consequence, but you still move forward. And at first I was really hesitant. I was like, yo, that ain't my style of gaming, you gotta play until you win. Until I realized, like, that kind of feels lame. Like, when you have to have this group get together to play a game, and it takes so much in order to orchestrate that, especially when you have kids, you have families, you have jobs, and then you play a campaign game, and then you get your one shot in, and you fail, and you're like, man, I guess I'll see you next week to play that exact same thing again. How did you guys approach that?
So we have that exactly. We actually each scenario actually has 3 ways to progress. There's your basic success, there's a bonus objective, and then there's a failure state.
Oh my god, that sounds amazing. Having a bonus objective will have me chasing that down every single time.
Yeah, the first fight, like the Rigby fight, can actually be kind of challenging. And I mean, I guess it's just spoilers, but you have to defeat all his minions, like his ads, in order to get the bonus objective for him. And he also summons 2 more when he hits half hit points. So at that point, you kind of have to make the decision. Okay, we can just burn him down and win, right? That's the basic. Or you have to kind of let him trail around beating on you while you defeat the ads that he spawned as reinforcements. So every fight has something like that. Yeah. And you still progress when you fail too.
Just to touch on the only fight, that Rigby fight is the only fight you repeat if you fail, but it's meant to be an intro, and no one should really be failing that one. So that's why it's like you replay it just because you got to do better. Because the later
right.
But like Nick said, yeah. So and it's funny because the intro fights, even if they feel easy, when you start going for the bonus objective, you're like, oh, we actually might not make it, right? Like the bonus objective is what tilts you to like, oh my gosh, this fight just went from kind of easy to we're probably going to lose, and then you're like, forget it. Let's just forget the bonus objective.
we just have to go, yeah.
But yeah, if you fail, most fights, if you fail, like Nick said, there's different perks you might not get. There's different items you might not get that you might need later that you have to end up buying or doing things for. There's random encounters that might come up now because you failed that fight. They might
on a branch.
Yeah, or like you get chosen options. So if you beat this fight, you get to choose option 1A or 1B. But if you fail, you only go to 1A. And you don't get a choice anymore.
What I really like about that is it gives you agency within the campaign itself, and it still allows a failure to mean something for your group. It's not just a loss of time. You're still progressing, and you're invested, and it gives you a little bit of information. Are there persistent elements that for a fact, maybe even taking a loss on this fight, cutting your losses now may be beneficial in the long run? Or are there going to be times where you're at the very edge of death and you're like, I still have to throw everything I can at this fight in order to continue?
There are times where the bonus objective will give you an advantage. It's a kind of a push your luck. So do you feel it's going to be worth it? So not so much for the failure. Like I didn't want to set up a deliberate fail because that feels kind of cheap. I don't like it when it happens in video games either. When you have an unwinnable fight or something that you're supposed to lose. So we don't have that in there. But that's something that we could consider as.
Yeah, make that a cutscene in every video game ever. Please do not make an unwinnable fight that I am like trying so hard to win, and then it's like, oh, you were supposed to lose.
Yeah, you're using like all your ethers and your potions and stuff, and you're supposed to lose it anyway. What?
Nonsense. You do not use a single ether or elixir until you have over 100 of them. You're at the very end of the game, and you're like, well, there might be a bonus boss after this, so I still am not going to use it.
And I just wanted to point out one thing, because you were saying about the time it takes to get this together. One thing that also separates us from some of these other encounter games is our encounters about 45 to 60 minutes each. So it's not like the 3 or 4 hour fights. We wanted people to be able to replay this. There's the different paths you can take, different classes you could level up through. You're going to want to play this again and doing 10. It's about 10 fights in a full playthrough. We want you to be able to do it again. So in a 3 hour night, you can get through about a quarter to a third of the campaign if you really pushed it. And so if you can get your friends together and do that, you can churn through a couple encounters, advance, level up, feel that progression. They're still long enough that you feel like you're doing something, but it's not killing 3 hours of time for one fight that you end up losing anyway, like you said. It's about an hour.
That is a relief. The flip side of the fail forward thing is, for example, in Journeys of Middle-earth, which I just did my final thoughts on the campaign, I was really positive on the game overall, but one of the experiences that I had was that we succeeded on almost every single mission. We failed a couple, but we still moved forward, and that felt great. And then we got to the final mission, and we lost it. And we lost it without really having context going in for what we would need in order to win it. And that felt really hollow. And because of the nature of that game, you can't just replay the end mission. They lock you out, and it's got the app integration stuff. But in your game, how did you handle that final battle to make it feel climactic and interesting and not overly punishing and ultimately like bad if you lose it?
So there's two parts to the game. There's the first half going up to the tower. It's called Domian's Tower. And the second half is within her tower. Once you're in her tower, depending on how you do, will affect the endings with which you come across. So there's multiple endings, and your successes and failures throughout the tower will affect that.
It also affects the last fight.
And it affects the last fight. So that's all.
Maybe we're spoiling too much.
Don't say anything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll leave it for, I guess, a post-release spoiler cast that we can just dive into all these elements here.
We did consider that, though. Absolutely, we considered it.
Good. Well, Dan, I have a couple questions specifically for you because you're the Kickstarter guy.
Nick's run a couple too. He ran two. Was it 5 years ago?
Yeah, Dan never fails to remind me. He's like, how long ago was that? Like 5 years in Kickstarter is.
No, but Nick's ran two, and they were very successful, and he did great. But yes, I'm
3 for 3.
3. Oh, that's right. The third one, I forgot about that one.
Well, I'm thinking about specifically like Letiman Games is now very established, or in the Kickstarter realm, and then you also have Galactic Raptor Games that you're partnering on with Carla Kopp of Weird Giraffe, and. What I want to know about is hearing your perspective on the simultaneous release expansion, because this is something that I think has been happening more and more with Kickstarter games, and I want to know from the publisher perspective, when you're developing a game and you say, all right, we have this game, and then you can also pay at this higher tier, and you're going to get this expansion. And that gets a lot of criticism by people like me as a reviewer who's like, why isn't this just packed into the box? If it was designed as part of the original game, this feels like day one downloadable content for a video game. And, most people tend to think that sucks in the video game realm. So what's your case for this from the publisher perspective?
So I often do something that's like a $5 or $10 deluxe add-on as well. And part of it is, you want a bigger experience for the people who want to go all in, but some people don't want to go all in either. And this game's already big, right? This is an expensive game to begin with. It's going to be $75 on Kickstarter, and it's got 20 classes within it. So we wanted additional content, but honestly, Nick has ideas for so many different classes. Like we can put 40 classes in this thing.
Nick's a monster, nonstop. He's like 50 classes.
And so he's got, we could do 40 classes, and each class has 10 to 20 cards each. And then, this thing's already got over 800 cards. Let's push it to 1,500. And, at some point we had to stop it, right?
It did.
Right?
We did. Dan
we did.
Like 300. We sat down and Dan cut like 300
I cut 300 cards in the beginning. And so we have 20 classes, 21 right now. We may have a couple stretch goals for additional classes that we want to add. But again, it's like adding classes isn't 1 or 2 cards. So that's why they're stretch goals, because we're going to add 20 or so cards in with each one. So we wanted something that people could add on to add more variety that felt a little different. So Nick, we have an expansion pack we're offering for an additional $15. That's 3 more classes you can play through. And so it's kind of meant to be just kind of a small add-on, right? It's 3 additional classes. It's going to have a mini for the boss as well. And the classes are a little different. So one's a Spellblade, and the Spellblade can like enchant weapons. So you get loot and fights, and they have weapons. But when you get the weapons, they kind of work the same for everyone. The Spellblade can like enchant the weapons and things like that, right? So the Spellblade can actually interact with them, which is a little different. And then there's the Time Mage who can sift through decks, and there's no one else who can really do that. So they're very unique in how they act, and so they felt a little bit different from the base, if that makes sense. So we thought they were good for a small expansion. We have ideas for bigger expansions that we haven't worked on, just because that would be big late game content that's released later. But we wanted something, like I said, that's a small add-on. People who don't want to go all in or don't have a ton of money could stop at the base game and still feel complete, but this adds a little more variety.
Right. And unlike video game day one DLC, right, there's a production cost involved, right? As Dan mentioned, there's cards, minis. So, like a video game, that content's already there. It's not like unlocking it on the disc, right?
Right. Well, there's still development cost in the people involved. You could make the argument that if we had the budget for a $60 release game, then we put that game out, and then we were hoping that we could add additional content beyond what you would normally expect for this level of game, that, we developed this other thing, and if you want it, you can get it. So I see the argument there. I just know that in talking heads online, on message boards, on forums, everything, whether it's video games or board games, games, you do get a lot of criticism, and I've even given a lot of this criticism, but I do want to, while I'm talking to such experienced representatives of the Kickstarter world as yourselves, give voice to that and at least hear your side of like why this is something that makes sense from a business perspective and why it may make sense from a consumer perspective.
I talked a little bit on the business end of like the cost and how people want to go in, but the one thing I didn't touch on too is there's some people who are really involved in your campaign, right? Like there are people in your community who really want to help you, right? And some people I've had in other campaigns where we're almost to a stretch goal and they're like, I'm just going to throw in additional copies of the game. I don't need it, but like I want to help you get there, right? Okay. And so some things like this add incentive for people who want to add more to it, that bring more funds to the campaign. Without like just forcing them to buy extra stuff that doesn't matter necessarily. You know what I mean? Like this is really additional content that people who want to contribute more, help the campaign succeed faster, can contribute more, get more content for the game that actually is really neat, playable content. But like I said, felt a little different from the base game and was kind of cut. You know what I mean? Just for keeping it as a tight cost perspective originally. So now people can go, a little more in. It's something that we got the art on, but again, it wasn't a huge investment for that. We've developed it, but adding the cards to the game is the biggest expense, and there's a mini we want to add. And again, we don't want to put too many minis in the base game, but if we see there's a big, crowd that wants this, then we're happy to add more into. There's one in the expansion. We might have more stretch goals. And so it's just additional ways to get content that's not going to jack up the price of the base game too much.
Are those pre-painted minis?
We have a set of painted minis that someone's going to paint for a high-level tier in the campaign,
Gotcha.
But they won't be painted in the campaign.
I saw some images online. I was like,
"It is such a good job."
Yeah. Oh man, those look incredible. If they're packing those in, I can't imagine the cost on those.
We're going to have 20 copies of those. We're potentially looking for more artists in case there's a demand for the painted sets so that we could get more people. It's just we have one person doing it. We don't want to be like, here's 100 sets of 5 that you have to paint now.
Well, don't get me wrong. Like the sculpts on them are incredibly rad. Like they are beautiful and they capture the artwork that's throughout the game and all the promotional stuff that I've looked at online. You have such a beautiful, vibrant tone with this game. It feels inviting, adventuresome. It almost looks in a way like anime meets Pixar, and it's jaw-dropping. And I want to know more about the art direction for the game. Like, where did you start when you were like, how do we adapt this beloved system and game and experience and overall vibe in a visual way?
But this is Nick, because he found it.
I actually found Jacob. Jacob Croft. I found him on the D&D subreddit. And he just posted a couple of commissions he'd done of character classes, and I'm like, "What? That's the style that we want." It was perfect, as you mentioned. If you remember the original Final Fantasy Tactics art for the classes, right? It's kind of cartoony. It's nice, but without being too serious. And I wanted someone who could evoke that feeling.
And no one has a nose.
Right, no, they actually have noses in this. Right, but yeah, in the Final Fantasy Tactics, nobody has a nose. Like in the cutscenes, in the portfolio faces, no noses. Not even a shadow of a nose, just no noses. But but we wanted someone to have that feel. And the sculptor, Heriberto Valle Martinez, he actually did the Grim Forest minis. He loved the art so much, even though he was really busy, he's like, okay, I'll sculpt these characters because I love the art so much.
Yeah, and like Nick said, it's what I love too is it's inviting for all, but it's not childish, right? Like it's cartoony and welcoming, and like you said, like it's very adventurous, welcoming, family friendly without being cutesy kitty necessarily, right? Like because there's a point where it's so family friendly, it's really too cutesy, and some people won't like that because they're like, oh, that looks really childish or whatever.
But it's not the chibi art.
Right, and this doesn't have that feel necessarily, but it's still that inviting, welcome to all, like kind of warm feeling when you see it. Kind of, it's just nice.
It almost has like a Legend of Korra vibe. It has these really amazing aesthetics throughout. It's approachable, and you're right, it's cartoony, but it's not childish. Like it feels like it has depth and there's actual character imbued into the characters, and I really appreciate that. Now, as far as the game, like, I could talk to you about Final Fantasy Tactics forever. I could talk to you about this game specifically forever, but I don't want you to reveal all the secrets. So what is the core element that you want to leave with that you think people need to know about this game if they're kind of considering it?
For me, it's the class system. Like, I want you to know that we tried our very best to capture that feel. I mean, it's not exactly, it's not exactly the job system from Final Fantasy, but it's what we wanted to see in a tabletop game of that version. So lots of class building, lots of freedom of movement, and I want someone to find a cool build, not even necessarily a broken min-max optimized build, but something that feels fun and fits their playstyle.
Well, that's exactly it too, right? The job class system is amazing. I said there's 20 classes and 5 levels within each, so that's 100 different levels you could explore, where each one's a different card you're getting, or cards, right? Or build, right? And so there's always different ways to approach it, and you know, there are times you'll end up with 6 or 7 passive abilities and you can only use 3. And what's cool is some may be good for this fight, but not for the next fight. So it's not like you always pick the same 3, right? Some are like, oh, you can move through obstacles or walls. And it's like in this fight, there are some. So you slot that one in and you sacrifice something else you really like. But the next fight, you don't have any. And you're like, great, I don't have to sacrifice that slot anymore. So there's a lot of every fight, you're picking what you're including in there between the loot that you're getting and the passives you're getting. And then, like Nick said, I love, like, the Dark Knight's one of my favorites. I haven't played it in a while because I've been trying some other classes out, but like, you know, I thought it looked cool, so I was like, oh, I'm going to level up to that, see how the cards work out. And then when I'm playing them and actually using the actions, I was like, I really like this, you know? And then I went Warlock, the same thing, and then I went Necromancer, and I liked that better, and I stopped going towards Warlock, and everyone plays something different, and they have characters that they synergize with, that, like, emotionally, or like the play styles, and to find that and connect with that character and play it is just really cool.
Well, I cannot wait. This sounds awesome. For everyone in the audience, if you're listening to this or watching this when it goes live, then that means the Kickstarter has just gone live, and you should go check it out. And there's probably all kinds of information about it there. And as far as having these guys on the show, Dan, Nick, this has been a pleasure, and I need to get, like, the whole career, the origin story for each of you, so I would love to have you back on the show sometime so we can go over kind of the broad strokes of how you got to this point and where you're going from here.
That'd be great, and like we said, hopefully this thing, if this does gangbusters, we have a lot of cool content planned for after this, for additional releases, and we'd be happy to come on and talk about that again, or, like you said, recap once it's out, and kind of some of the spoilers we didn't want to touch on.
Like a post-mortem for this interview would be really cool. Like, assuming the campaign does gangbusters, post-mortem would be really nice.
So we'd be happy to do that for sure.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, guys.
Thank you so much for having us. Have a good night.
You too.
If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website, cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.